Good evening or afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another weather forecast by Age Weather Forecast, and we have a lot of updates here for the tropics here. Hurricane warnings have now been issued for Long Island here. The first time we've seen hurricane warnings in a while over there. Actually, this is the first time we've actually had hurricane watches across New England since, I believe it was since Irene here, basically almost exactly a decade ago. And obviously, as well with Hurricane Bob, which obviously as well hit in August there across portions of Rhode Island. So we're seeing obviously, and I wouldn't call this historic, but it's definitely a breakthrough in the weather. Basically, I mean hurricane warnings now for portions of Connecticut, Long Island. I think even portions of Rhode Island. I believe so as well. So we do actually have, we do of course have hurricane warnings now for the Northeast and New England. It's obviously extremely rare to see hurricane warnings over there. I mean, we didn't even get warnings up there, I believe, not even for Sandy. But correct me if I'm wrong with that. And then Grace here, I mean, Henri right now is at 70 miles an hour, so it's basically about to become a hurricane. Obviously, like I did say, it was expected to become a hurricane by Friday afternoon or evening. It's exactly Friday afternoon. So watching out for it to possibly become a hurricane by possibly maybe 8 o'clock Eastern. I know the 5 o'clock has not come out yet, and I wouldn't doubt they have it as a hurricane by 5 o'clock, but we will see what they have at the moment. But this is advisory 20, 70 miles an hour, at low minimal temperature pressure at 994, and now starting to go to north northwest at 7 miles an hour. So it's finally stopped going westward. It's obviously gone pretty far southwest. I mean, it's very close to the Bahamas, not too far from the Outer Banks. I mean, things have gone a lot further south than expected, which is why we're not really watching out for Long Island and portions of Connecticut. They're not the really main area to watch out as well. We can't rule out the possibility for some significant winds, and obviously really big threats for portions of Rhode Island and Massachusetts, since they will be set in the northeast quadrant. So keeping a very close eye on that. And I believe as well, not only do we have hurricane warnings, but we do have storm surge warnings. That's what we're looking at. I believe 3 to 5 foot storm surge. And then let's get into the actual discussion here. So this is actually the peak storm surge. Actually, yeah, 3 to 5 foot storm surge there across portions of an arrangement Bay, 2 to 4 there across Long Island, 3 to 5 feet, but across New England and portions off Cape Cod. So even watching out for some as well, even some nasty waters there, and as well some minimal storm surge all the way down near Atlantic City. Discussion here though, and likely to become a hurricane later today here, but there you see a peak of 85 miles an hour within the next 24 hours, so it is no longer 90. However, it remains still rather strong at 85 here. But it looks like it's probably going to make landfall as either a 70 or a 75 mile an hour system. So it may just be stronger than our Eileen here. It probably will just be slightly stronger than Eileen. But we're going to keep a very close eye on this. Obviously, it's going to be a pretty big threat towards New England Northeast, considering what they're used to and what they're not. I mean, this will even be a big threat no matter where you're talking about. And a big threat we're watching out is Hurricane Grace, which is about to officially have rapidly intensified today. Earlier, it was 65 miles an hour. Then it went to 85 within one update. And now it's at 90 miles an hour and minimal center pressure at 979 millibars. It still has plenty of time before a landfall, I believe around 18-ish hours or so, and is moving west there at 10 miles an hour. So things really getting to act together. 90 miles an hour, likely to become a Category 2 hurricane. There's a peak there, 105 miles an hour near the coast here. So looking at probably a 70 or 100 mile an hour, 105 mile an hour landfall. However, I think at this point it could very well become stronger than 105. I'm thinking maybe anywhere from 110 to 115 cannot be ruled out. So I would not rule out the possibility of a major hurricane there. I mean, really little vertical shear. I mean, there's really not much of a big threat here that's in the way of the system. It's really gone its act together in the Bay of Campeche, and Henri as well is starting to get its act together. Or I believe it's Henri starting to get its act together as well. So as you can see, Grace is looking like an absolute monster right now. We see extreme hot towers within this system here, this main convection. I mean, these hot towers are absolutely crazy, seeing anywhere from like negative 90 to maybe even near possibly negative 95 degrees Celsius cloud tops. I mean, we're seeing some really extreme, really extreme cloud tops. Obviously, really nice cold cloud tops. Really strong really strong counterclockwise flow, really strong vorticity, as well as seeing a rather strengthening eye wall here. Actually, there's not a fully closed eye wall, however, there is a rather developing eye wall, specifically rather good on the eastern quadrant. If you look at 37 temp, it gives you a general idea where this eye wall is developing. This thing's an absolute monster. I mean, look at the convection. This thing has definitely gone a lot more structure than this morning. Here when I woke up like at 6 o'clock, it's just an absolute monster right now. Really strong, clear outer bandings here. Really strong vorticity, really strong convection, as well as some lighting within the center there. So this thing's overall getting it's getting its act together here. Let's look at visible though, because visible as well looks pretty intimidating. That's not visible. There's visible, but this thing as well looks pretty intimidating on visible as well. You can kind of see there's that nice convection within the really high cloud top. That latest convection burst right there. Clearly see the upper level anticyclone right there. Kind of seeing that dispersing and divergent clockwise spin within the mid levels there, kind of preventing any much shear. Even there's not really much shear anyway. It's like 10 15 knots anyways. Those things overall in a pretty conducive environment, and it will continue to be into a conducive environment for overall a while. So I would not doubt if it does get to a major hurricane. It's like an absolute monster. So areas there across eastern Mexico have to keep a very close eye on this system, and I would recommend take precautions, because not only will the winds be a pretty big threat, extremely significant flooding, and as well we cannot rule the possibility for storm surge. Even though the National Hurricane Center is mainly focused on the U.S., it does not give out storm surge forecasts for anywhere else other than the U.S., so I do not have an exact look at the actual storm surge, but I would not doubt the possibility if it does bring in anywhere from possibly 8 to maybe 10 plus feet of storm surge. I would not doubt this does bring in some deadly storm surge. Obviously, the National Hurricane Center highlighting as dangerous storm surge. However, again, anything really above 5 feet could be considered deadly, considering obviously the average height of somebody. Even if you're 6 foot and it's 5 foot storm surge, it's still quite dangerous. Obviously, it's still a pretty big threat, especially considering the currents and the overall speed of rip current, or not rip current, sorry, of storm surge, and when it flows in the actual land. So here's like the actual 4 p.m. The 4 p.m. Central Time, which is 5 o'clock Eastern Time update, and this thing's an absolute monster. I mean, look at the storm surge. The storm surge is basically the length up to all Louisiana coast. I mean, I think this is just an absolute monster. Hurricane force wind is obviously a little bit more limited, but I mean, this is just a really widespread wind field for a tropical storm wind sustained, and that's exactly why the warnings are so far north. I wouldn't even doubt to get further extended further northward, but really watching out there for portions of east central, or I guess the west central portions of the Bay of Campeche waters there in eastern Mexico have hurricane warnings there. I mean, I think it's going to be a massive threat, and I would recommend for those who are in this hurricane warning or anyone just a little bit further inland that they would evacuate, considering how the storm could very well become easily a major hurricane before landfall within the next 18-ish hours, and then weakening to a tropical storm and depression as it gets closer to Mexico City. Here's like the actual intended guidance here as of 18Z, and the majority want to have it staying away from Category 2, but obviously the National Hurricane Center has a 105 mile an hour peak, and I believe that peak actually came out before the 18Z model runs came out, so I wouldn't doubt that the majority to have it getting up to a Category 2. Here's a look here now at Tropical Storm Henri, which is about to become a hurricane. This thing's not looking too shabby at all. You can kind of clearly see the overall upper anticyclone within this system. As well, another big thing is that although there's not much shear right now, in the future when it does collect closer to that ridge of shear, which obviously impacted its overall track in the future, but we're going to be seeing a lot of unidirectional shear basically, so we're not going to be seeing directional shear, so we're going to be seeing kind of more speed shear than directional shear, so we're not going to be seeing any big threat. So since there is going to be unidirectional shear and a good bit, you can actually kind of clearly see in the soundings of Henri, there's going to be not really much of a big threat. So you have the ULAC right there, and obviously unidirectional shear, so it shouldn't be a big problem. We're going to be seeing some really long-lasting storms within the center here for a while. A good amount of convection there, obviously some pretty good spin overall. Some good banding as well developing, and this is obviously heading now. Basically, I think at this point it's going to start going due north. I do not think this is going northwest. I think at this point it's going probably closer to northwest or due north at this point, based on its latest track. It looks like it's going due north at this point. So we're going to keep a very, very close eye on Long Island, portions of New England as well. So here's look at the IR forecast here on Henri as well. You can kind of see a pretty overall good amount of convection within that low circulation. The MLC and LLC are most likely kind of stacked, or it looks like they're mainly stacked kind of really closely together. So I think I would not doubt It looks like the MLC is probably slightly further north than the actual LLC at this point, but overall it looks like they're gonna start getting its act together, and I would not doubt if they at this point they are most likely stacked, meaning the next process or the next step will be getting it to the Hurricane. Overall, some pretty good convection specifically centered across the LLC. Obviously not as widespread, not releasing as not releasing hot towers like we are obviously seeing within Grace. But here's like the latest tropical storm Henri update on the alerts here for the Northeast and the obviously we do have hurricane warnings now for portions of much of Long Island and as well for portions of southern Connecticut. I mean, who would have thought if you looked up at Montauk or New Haven, Connecticut, or much of Rhode Island, who would have thought if you went on there on the Weather Channel or the National Weather Service and you saw hurricane warnings? I mean, we have not had hurricane warnings here in such a long time here. I mean, I don't even think Sandy brought warnings up here near Long Island in Connecticut. Obviously, not even Irene brought. I don't even know if hurricane warnings were even issued for Irene. And I think the latest we actually saw hurricane warnings within this region was probably Hurricane Bob, which I believe was in 1991. So we're talking about like a 30-year time frame since we've had a hurricane warning here. So let me actually confirm this and see if Hurricane Bob was the latest one to bring in hurricane warnings. Alright, so I just checked and there actually is no past cones or advisories or anything like that we can actually get a look at from Bob, most likely because obviously how old it is, the actual storm itself. But it looks like that, I believe, based on just common sense, Bob was the last one to bring in a hurricane warning for this region. So that's basically exactly 30 years, basically. What I think Bob happened like August 19th or 20th. I think Bob made landfall August 19th. So basically 30 years ago yesterday. So we're getting very close to the Bob anniversary, or we already passed the Bob anniversary for landfall. So this is very odd timing and just overall coincidence. I think it's pretty big coincidence, specifically since we're watching it's still unknown, but maybe a hurricane landfall again. Still, we still can't rule out the possibility, but anywhere from 70 to 75 miles an hour could be the landfall here as well. Tropical storm watches have now been issued now for New York City, New York, and as well portions of the Northeast New Jersey. Tropical storm warnings as well have pushed a little bit further westward, including areas like I believe near Hartford, not Hartford, that's not Hartford, near Stamford, Connecticut, which is down here, I believe so, and as well portions there of just north of New York City. Hurricane watch has now remained all the way from Connecticut up to areas near Cape Cod and Princetown. So as well, overall, really widespread alerts here. Let's look at the actual, National Hurricane Center alert, or the advisory at the 5 o'clock Eastern. And you can kind of see pretty widespread, I guess you say, wind field within Henri or Henri. And it's obviously produced now hurricane warnings across New England. I believe they even have the warnings there for Rhode Island. So there are hurricane warnings for Rhode Island. But at least based on this, even though that what we just looked at did not have a hurricane warnings for Rhode Island. And there you see tropical storm warnings there for far western Long Island, not including New York City, portions of southwestern Connecticut, far southern New York, and as well portions there of northeast New Jersey. We do have a few warnings. Not New Jersey does not have new warnings. They are under a tropical storm watch. And obviously, we are looking at getting up to 85 miles an hour and then making landfall as a 75-mile hurricane. I believe in the last update, at 2 o'clock, they had it as a tropical storm landfall. Now they have it as a hurricane once again. So if you know anybody within this cone here, obviously looking at a landfall for Sunday afternoon. So I most likely will live stream this hurricane landfall. I wouldn't call it historic landfall, but I would say it's a pretty odd event here. And obviously looking at then this thing to steer very quickly and weaken very quickly over the Appalachian Mountain into a post-tropical depression just 24 hours after its landfall. So it's going to go from hurricane to post-tropical depression within 24 hours or so. But again, if you're near Long Island, Connecticut, as well overall, Rhode Island, Long Island, and even Massachusetts there, please keep a very, very close eye on the system and have a plan ready. And obviously, if you are on Long Island, if you're in just general region here, I would recommend you guys evacuate, or at least have a very big plan, including shutters, including their generators, all that good stuff. You're going to want to have all of that if you do not evacuate, but I would recommend a smart decision, especially if you're kind of on far east, or if you're in far eastern Long Island there. I would definitely recommend you do evacuate as well. If you're near kind of the Watch Hill region as well, I would definitely evacuate. Because look at 3 to 5 foot storm surge there, even near Cape Cod. And the reason why the worst storm surge so far to the northeast of the actual landfall, which would most likely be around at least this general region here, is because obviously typically the northeast quadrant where is the strongest winds. That's going to allow for the messier condition and the larger waves to be over there. And obviously just how it is, since it is obviously a counterclockwise moving system, it's going to be obviously for areas to the northeast. If it was obviously in the South Atlantic, typically the worst storm surge will be towards the west because of the clockwise movement. But that's obviously not the case here. But even 1 to 3 foot storm surge all the way across New Jersey there, as well 2 to 4 foot storm surge all the way, including Long Island Sound, East Rockaway Inland. So even watching out for possibly some significant storm surge. New York City standard wise, it's going to be pretty significant. So keeping a very, very, very close eye on the tropics here, especially even in New York City. Really watching out if you're near Narragansett Bay, Long Island Sound, Watch Hill, even near Cape Cod, keeping a very close eye on for you guys. So here's looking at the tropical storm Henri, intended guidance, and you can kind of see almost all of them are taken to a category 1 there, looking at anywhere from 65 to anywhere as high as probably 70 knots or even 75 knots. So really watching out for anywhere from 80 to 85 miles an hour for this to get to its peak here. I honestly think 85 is likely just based on its structure and how it's getting to act together at this point. But the reason why we are seeing this huge spike within Grace specifically is because of the ocean heat content overall, how warm the waters are, and just overall how conducive the environment is. So obviously, this is obviously slowed down a little bit compared to as it was in Yucatan. So obviously, it was like moving like what 15 to 16 before Yucatan, and now it obviously slowed down. And ocean heat content isn't the thickest, nor is it the deepest like it was in the Western Caribbean. But it's still pretty strong, specifically where the system is right now, anywhere from really 100 meters basically to 120 meters. So overall, it's still pretty conducive for some rapid intensification, especially considering there's really little vertical shear. And as well, we're seeing a pretty overall good atmosphere. So that's exactly why this thing's really getting to add together. Obviously, 30 degrees Celsius waters as well. Shear again should be a problem. We're basically seeing it in an environment within around 10 knots or so. There you see that strong ridge, kind of like this. There's that tut. Obviously, it's actually gonna be like kind of like this. Really, that's kind of really watching out for. Let me actually do a different color. Actually, that's not gonna work. So there's obviously the pretty conducive environment right now ahead of Henri around 5 to 10 knots. However, there will be a little bit more shear as it gets closer towards portions of the northeast here, but it's going to be going through pretty overall conducive narrow hallway between the ridge and the trough overall. So it's going to be pretty very tight. However, again, it does have that strong anticyclone as well. It does have really mainly unidirectional shear, so it shouldn't be a massive problem with that. So let's now get a look here to the 12D GFS forecast, and the 18D did not come out for like another 30 minutes or so, but here's a look here at what 8 or 12D wants to have. So they actually want to have, they're actually obviously behind on both systems. They actually have Grace at 988, this is 979, and then they have the 994 millibar Henri right now at only 996. So GFS is a little bit behind like they've been for a while, just because how these storms have been very on and off with their intensification. But they want to get the landfall for portions of Mexico within the next 18 hours and at 972 millibars. So at this point, it may make a landfall in the upper 960s, maybe 968, maybe 969. It's really something to keep a very, very close eye on. As well, really watching out. Now let's get to a look here for the northeast for Henri. So obviously it's gonna be pretty weird system with Henri here. So let's actually get a closer look here. So it's gonna be heading toward obviously more of the Long Island region. So we're starting to see a little bit smaller of a western shift here, even though there's really been a consistent eastern shift. But obviously even the National Hurricane Center update, they are taking it further westward because of how far west and southwest it actually has been going here. So here's a look at 987 millibars there as it makes landfall across far northeastern Long Island there. But look at that, 978 right before landfall, but obviously weakens because of the really cold waters in that general vicinity. But here's the 12 DGFS here. So they're having kind of going rather strong here and actually kind of going a last minute kind of just west northwest turn towards directly Long Island. So I think this general vicinity has to keep a very close eye on the worst impacts here. If you're like near New York City there or Bronx or New York, I wouldn't keep a very close eye on it. But I would definitely expect impacts and still be prepared for the worst here because obviously there's still a chance it could move slightly more eastward or westward. Sorry, but I doubt that. But here's now look what the CMC has, and they're obviously extremely behind. I'm not even going to show them because how far behind they are. It's now the icon as well. Icon's actually not too far behind. They have it at 981 within 3 hours, and that's partly because it's the 18Z, and they want to have a landfall at around, let's see, 976 millibars. And then they want to have, let's see, Henri getting quite strong here as it makes its way towards the northeast here, 983, 981. And actually, the CMC or the icon wants to have a landfall over directly over New York City, basically, like right there near Queens, right there near yeah, basically Queens area where JFK is as well. I mean, I'm not sure what this is, but this is definitely very interesting what they're showing here. So there's still a chance it could move slightly more westward. So if you're in northeast New Jersey and New York City general region, I would definitely keep a very close eye on it. Just to not obviously better being safe than sorry. So let's now get a look at the actual 10-meter winds here. So this is actually a look at the 12 DGFS. So let's get a look at the 10-meter wind speeds in miles an hour. So there is a really strong storm. They have it at 75 miles an hour, then weakening before landfall. But I mean, look at that. The northeast quadrant is definitely a pretty big storm. The thing is, this is actually going to be quite symmetrical, actually. So we could still see some pretty big impacts for central Long Island there. Looking at maybe anywhere from maybe 48 miles an hour, 42 miles an hour. However, like you're like in eastern Long Island. Western Long Island, sorry. You're not going to get really much anything. I mean, look at New York City, only 12 miles an hour, 18 miles an hour. There is tropical storm watches for northeast New Jersey and all that because of the inconsistency we do have with models right now. But, I mean, look at that. The worst, obviously, will be really highlighted toward those areas. We have that pretty high storm surge across areas. Obviously, the really strong northeast, that strong counterclockwise flow there. That's going to obviously bring some really strong and high storm surge across Rhode Island and Providence, Connecticut there. But look at the really strong impacts there for Rhode Island. Going to get absolutely just hammered there in Rhode Island, as well as some stronger winds inland. Let's actually get a look here at the actual 10-meter wind gusts in miles an hour as well. See what this looks like here. I'm actually quite interested. Look at the gusts here. Gust up to 50 to 60 there, 70 gust. And then gusts will decrease to the 40s and 30s. But as well, I'm really watching out even into Connecticut and even starting to New Hampshire and all that. We could very well see some significant tree damage. Let's now get a look here at what the see what the NAM 3 kilometer is showing here. Let's actually get a look at that later. Actually, let's see what the European has. And let's see what the European has in miles an hour here. So the European is as well kind of taking a pretty far eastern shift here, or sorry, western shift. So that's kind of what GFS is showing, like right here, and then European kind of like that way. So we can still really well still see the actual landfall closer towards kind of east central Long Island instead of far eastern Long Island. But yeah, keeping a very close eye on the European. Also have European though has it really weak though, only hitting at 60 miles an hour. And let's now get a look here with the NAM 3 kilometer watch system. We all know the NAM 3 kilometer loves over forecasting storms. So there's just an absolute beauty storm there. I mean, that's just an absolute monster if you look at it. So looking at 82 miles an hour. Then they actually may have making landfall at around 76 miles an hour. So actually going straight through central Long Island. If the NAM 3 kilometer were to verify, then the tropical storm watches in northeast New Jersey would make sense. Because obviously the NAM 3 kilometer is doing what it's going to do. If it verifies, it gets up to 85 miles an hour. Actually, the NAM 3 kilometer wants to have to get to around 88 within 40 hours or so as it makes its way towards the storm here. But within that around 40 hours or so, we can start seeing some impacts across Long Island and even some gusty winds there all the way near southeast Massachusetts. Southeast Massachusetts. I mean, that's going to be absolutely devastating for Long Island and Connecticut if this were to verify. So overall, keeping a very, really close eye if you're near Islip, if you're obviously just overall Long Island. I don't really know many Long Island names. If you're on Long Island or a portion of southern Connecticut or Rhode Island, I would definitely keep a very close eye on the news here. And as well, if you know any family that live there or friends that live there, I would recommend you guys do share the channel they can get more updates within this actual system itself. Also, a pretty big threat, and obviously another reason why we're really seeing significant tree damage is because of the amount of flooding we're gonna be seeing here. Obviously, some pretty significant flooding. Looking at anywhere from maybe probably 10 to 15 inches of rain there across specifically Massachusetts, and as well really looking at a pretty strong flooding for eastern Long Island, portion of eastern Long Island, portion of Rhode Island, much of Massachusetts and Vermont. Even New England could very well see some significant flooding. So considering the amount of saturation we're gonna be seeing within the soil, it will be very easy to have trees fall down. So that's exactly why we're really watching out for some pretty widespread damage, and this could very well be a pretty significant event here. And I believe that Connecticut has just issued a state of emergency.